on talking tonight about equanimity, which can be kind of challenging at a time of such heightened trouble in the world. So I'd like to talk about it, especially as it contributes to our ability to meet the kind of profound unrest and uncertainty that we are experiencing collectively at the moment. This has been quite a week, quite a year so far. And the country is being forced to bear witness to the First Noble Truth in a way that we have never, ever done as a collective body. The truth of the suffering that has been put on a very large portion of our population for a very long time. So we're facing this, and we're facing it for the first time, but more accurately, the white people in this country are facing it in a way that we've never faced before. We're waking up to a level of protracted harm and injustice that we have visited on Black and brown peoples, imported people, and indigenous peoples that many have never let themselves know about or face. And indeed, our educational system hasn't been very good at apprising the white population of what has been going on. So we're a country built on slave labor and the forced theft of indigenous lands from the very beginning. So this is 400 years or more. And now we are come to a time of reckoning. I bring this up in a very straightforward way because I think it's important for us all to acknowledge the profound karma that we are all needing to somehow work with in order to bring about peace in the land. And of course, the Buddha was very concerned about the same thing. And there is the First Noble Truth, which is this truth of suffering. So when we look at equanimity, we're not talking about solutions or an easy way out. Some of you have been activists for a lot of your life, so this is nothing new, these conditions, and some have not been. But now all together we are presented with an extreme moment that calls on us to respond and reckon whether we are going to be actively in response or we can't turn away from what's been going on. And we want to respond with intelligence and an awareness of the full circumstances, the full truth of our conditions. So in accord with one of the foundational teachings of the Buddha and one of the foundational facts of biological life, we are interdependent. We are all in this, and we can't miss the truth of it now. The climate, the human world, and the viral load are all making us realize that we can't breathe. We can't continue to breathe with conditions as they have come to be. The atmosphere that we've created is toxic on many, many levels. So this is a time to use the teachings to help us respond intelligently to circumstances that are wide open for a new response that's based on wisdom and caring and clear seeing and truth-telling. The 4 divine abidings, Brahma Viharas. The Viharas, Vihara in Sanskrit means a dwelling place or refuge. Divine, the 4 divine abidings. Divine meaning sacred. We bring to our circumstances the practice of the sacred. We recognize that we want to align ourselves with an awareness of the sacredness of all life and all of these conditions that we'd rather not have to deal with, but they are ours to deal with. So the 4 divine abidings are compassion, love, loving kindness, and sympathetic witness. And they are the medicine that we need to take as we keep our eyes and hearts wide open. Compassion, love, and sympathetic witness. Equanimity is the integration into our life of the pain and the responsibility that we all carry for the current circumstances. So equanimity is not a way out. It's not a way over. It's not a way around. It is definitely through. And equanimity can only emerge through the practice, the very active practice of compassion and loving kindness and bearing witness. Being able to see what's right before our eyes and built into our whole system of governance. We can often make the mistake the meaning or the instruction that comes to us with the word equanimity. We can think that to be equanimous means not to be affected by circumstances. Means we have to turn off our pain and outrage at injustice, or just plain old turn away, drop out, which is harder and harder to do in our hyper-connected world. There's a reason it's so obvious that the demonstrations that have happened this week come out of a time of, first of all, forced incarceration by us, of us all in a certain way, right? Forced sequestration. And then also, we're all on our devices all the time. So what's going on is right before our eyes. There's no escaping the conditions. We're called on to meet with them with wisdom. This is the truth of our situation. The world as we know it is transforming by our own hand. It's not something that's going to come in the future, it's happening right now. The transformation. Some people, some wise leaders are calling this the great turning. Because it's not just a social movement, it's an ecological moment. It's a climate necessity. We all get caught up as human beings in our emotional minds and hearts. So this is a direct pointing to the meaning of the identity of relative and absolute. We have the absolute situation that we need to address. And all of the states of feeling and all of the stories attached to it are all coming up at the same time. On the one hand, we want to be cool and experience the refuge of the divine mind. And on the other hand, we're caught up. We are recipients and participants in a human world that is ruled by the 8 worldly winds. The 8 worldly winds: pleasure and pain, fame and shame, praise and blame, success and failure. We're always caught up in opposites, in opposition and separation. that's all too unmediated by the wisdom of our true interdependence. When we get caught in these various states, we can forget about the interdependent nature of our lives. If we praise and blame, we're saying good and bad, and we're kind of overriding the intimately connected complexity of everybody's behavior, of all behavior. So equanimity is one of the 4 divine abidings, and it's also one of the 8 factors of enlightenment. It comes up in every tradition, this teaching. In Christianity, equanimity is considered essential for carrying out the virtues of modesty, gentleness, contentment, temperance, and charity. And has a lot to teach us about faith. In Judaism, equanimity is a necessary foundation for moral and spiritual development. To not be pushed around so that we can really take a look and take responsibility for the choices that we make. In Hinduism, equanimity is how we nourish love and faith. In Islam, equanimity is meant to permeate our relationships and is a balancing principle. So the attribute that shows up in a list of wisdom characteristics over and over is worth paying attention to. This equanimity is really something that, since we have been contemplators of our behavior, we have looked to the importance of being able to see beyond our own immediate reactivity. Not to be ruled by the 8 worldly winds, by the passions, but being able to remain centered when we're surrounded by turmoil. It doesn't mean not to experience or to develop indifference. Whatever. Oh, whatever. Whatever is a dead way to live when we kind of fall back into whatever. Which in its own way is not keeping the first precept of non-killing. Equanimity is one way to serve that commitment to non-killing, to be able to meet life squarely head on with caring and constancy. Equanimity is what we develop over long experience, and from an intention to see through the content of our experience into the nature of it. It's not that we stop being who we are and feeling how we feel, but we know the nature of it. We know it when we are seized with fear, when we're seized with anger. And when we live according to the Bodhisattva vow to save all beings, equanimity supports our ability to see what's going on and to think well, to use the thinking function well in order to discern the next best step. This is one place, we're always so wanting to think non-thinking. Well, that's true. It's very useful to understand what that is pointing at in our own direct experience. But it clears the air so that we can, when we do think, we can think much more clearly. There's less static and interfering. And we can see what self is responding, what aspect of the self. In equanimity, what self is experiencing equanimity? I propose that it's the self that recognizes and identifies with the large life that we all share, with the more complete and interpenetrating, interrelated life. The self that understands that everybody wants to be happy, in spite of appearances. Everyone wants to be free of fear and to have enough to eat and to have their family relations be stable and loving. And through our awareness, we can look at the passing show of conditions. Equanimity is the ability to look through, Ram Dass would always call it passing show. This life is passing show. Conditions are impermanent. They're always changing and rearranging in ways that we see and also ways that we don't see. Speaking of ways that we don't see, I don't know about you guys, but today has been an amazing day. I've gotten a number of calls from people who are in deep crisis. I mean, more than usual. And I think what is passing through the population today, that it has kind of catapulted a lot of people's circumstances into really serious states. So we can't always see what's going on. We can't always see all of the conditions. So the more steady and stable we can be, starting with a stable and steady ability to breathe, the simple breath, the feeling of being a body on the earth, is one very important component to maintaining steady attention and steady benevolent responses, wise responses. When we're identified solely with conditions, we suffer. But when we also have clarified a view that goes beyond conditions, then we have access to equanimity when we need it as medicine to restore our ability to be healthy and to function in healthy ways. This is where equanimity transcends the relative and the absolute. So we probably all know the story of the farmer that tells us, that reminds us about the beauty and the wisdom of approaching things with don't know mind. So there's a poor old farmer who had a single horse and a teenage son. One day the horse ran away, and a bunch of neighbors came over to the farmer and said, "Oh, this is terrible, how awful, I'm so sorry you lost your horse." And the old man said, "Well, maybe, who knows? It could be good, it could be bad." Now this is said by somebody who has long experience to recognize that we don't know. We don't know. All we have is appearances. We're not sure what will happen here. So the neighbors leave and they don't know what to make of his response. It seems kind of weird. And then a few days later, the horse comes back and brings a couple of other wild horses with him. And the neighbors come by and they are congratulating him and rejoicing. "Oh, that's so great. Now you have 3 horses." And the farmer says, "Yeah, maybe, who knows? It could be bad, it could be good." Which doesn't mean he didn't feel happy, but he also knew anything can happen. So then a few days later, the man's son is riding one of these horses and he falls off and breaks his leg. And the neighbors come over again and offer condolences to him for his ill fortune. His son won't be able to work in the fields anymore with him. And the old farmer says, well, maybe, who knows? Could be good, could be bad. And then, of course, the final chapter here in this story is a few days later, the army comes to town. And every young man in the village is being forced to go to war. But they can't take the farmer's son. He has a broken leg, so he has to stay behind. This really is such a good guide to all of us, to look beyond conditions. It could be bad, it could be good, it could be both, everything. Not opposites, but just the complex unfolding of circumstances. So who better knows equanimity than a farmer, whose life is always ruled by the vagaries of changing and uncontrollable conditions? Don't know mind and impermanence are all developed through the seasons. So a farmer can plant 2 seeds and one flourishes and one never sprouts. Or we have 2 children and one does great and the other really has a lot of trouble. Or these seeds, they both sprout and flourish, and then a drought comes and they wither and die. Or one gets eaten by the grasshoppers swarming and another miraculously is spared and grows to yield rich grain. We all have seen this principle at play in our lives. We don't know. And when things are just going along in a same old pattern, we forget that we don't know. And we get attached to various outcomes. But when things heat up, we're reminded. Our practice is for the usual times, yes, but it's especially for the times of great upheaval. And we're in a time that is unprecedented on every major front. The world is teeming with humans and what we have made. The Earth's climate is changing. New viruses are infecting our human population. And the human population has infected directly and indirectly practically every living species on Earth. We're all one living and dying system. So I just want to bring this to an end by bringing up Noah's Ark, because the image of Noah's Ark has been coming to me over and over. It's just presenting itself. I'll be sitting quietly in Zazen and suddenly I'll just get a picture. It'll pop into my mind. The relevance of that story has never been so stark. The waters, the flood has risen around the globe, and in a way we're all in the ark. The water's all around. We're crowded together. We don't know how long we'll be here or whether these waters will subside and what we'll find when they do. And so this is a time that we're awakening from the slumber of privilege to practice really carefully, constantly, supporting each other in this practice, encouraging ourselves to practice. And part of that practice, of course, is to remember to enjoy ourselves, to be loving to ourselves and all beings that we meet, to be present to our experience, to feel our grief and fear and love, and to envision a world that we want to help bring forward. Because it's up to us. Just as our practice is up to us, the practice of our life, our awakening, our generosity is up to us. By practicing the equanimity of including all of it, and knowing and not knowing, letting knowing and not knowing take us beyond, always going beyond. Gate, gate, paragate, parasamgate, bodhisvaha, always going beyond. Equanimity allows us to keep all of our heart energy stoked, at the ready, because we're not trying always to overcome what's going on, but to meet it with our whole heart. So thank you for listening.